You know, when you think of cola, two names immediately pop into your head, right? Coca-Cola and Pepsi. For more than 100 years, they've been locked in this epic battle for our taste buds. But here's the crazy part. While one of them became this global icon almost from day one, the other one, well, it stumbled, it went broke, and it nearly vanished from history altogether. Not once, but twice.
And what's wild is that their stories start out almost identically. We're talking about the late 1800s. You've got two different pharmacists, just a few years and a few states apart, both tinkering in their drugstores, mixing up these syrupy, caffeinated drinks. They had absolutely no idea that they were kicking off one of the biggest corporate rivalries the world would ever see.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a brand that failed so spectacularly not only manage to survive, but claw its way back to challenge the undisputed king of cola? Okay, let's get into it.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to look at Pepsi's disastrous beginnings, its incredible comeback story, the legendary Cola Wars, and then how it transformed into this massive food and beverage empire, and finally, what its complicated legacy looks like today.
First up, the failures. I mean, before Pepsi was a name you knew, it was a brand that was basically on life support, pretty much defined by a couple of really, really bad decisions.
So, the inventor, Caleb Bradham, he had a real hit on his hands. It was first called Brad's Drink, but he renamed it Pepsi Cola. And boom, sales took off. The guy was on his way to being incredibly wealthy. But then, World War I happened. Sugar prices were going through the roof, and Bradham got scared. He thought they'd just keep going up, so he bet the entire company, buying a massive stockpile of sugar at its absolute peak price. And then, the exact opposite happened. Prices crashed, leaving him with a mountain of worthless sugar. Just like that, the company was completely wiped out.
And get this, if you want to know just how insignificant Pepsi was at the time, Coca-Cola was offered the chance to buy its broke little rival on 3 different occasions. And every single time they said no. They saw absolutely zero value in the brand. Little did they know, that decision would come back to haunt them for the next century.
So after that first collapse, the brand was sold off for scraps. A new owner tried to keep it going for about a decade, but just couldn't make it work. Then the Great Depression hits, and that was the final nail in the coffin. Pepsi went bankrupt for a second time. Honestly, by all accounts, the Pepsi story should have ended right there.
But it didn't. Instead, it staged one of the greatest turnarounds in business history. And it was all thanks to a candy executive by the name of Charles Goff.
Goff's plan to revive Pepsi was just brilliantly simple. He bought the bankrupt company, and instead of trying to compete on brand recognition, which was impossible, he competed on pure value. Remember, this is the Great Depression. Every penny counted. So he started selling Pepsi in 12-ounce recycled beer bottles for the exact same 5 cents that Coke was charging for its tiny little 6-ounce bottle. The message was simple and powerful.
And to really hammer this point home, Pepsi launched this incredibly catchy jingle. It actually became the first jingle ever broadcast coast to coast in America. They recorded it in 55 languages. It turned out to be one of the most effective ads of the century. Suddenly, by offering way more for less, Pepsi wasn't just another soda. It was the smart, savvy choice for a nation that was struggling. The underdog was officially back in the fight.
Okay, so Pepsi's back from the dead. And now it's ready to go on the attack. This next era is where the company stops just trying to survive and starts directly challenging Coke for the throne, not just on price, but on culture. As a whole new generation came of age, Pepsi brilliantly positioned itself as the cool, modern choice.
And the boldest move of all was the Pepsi Challenge. It was so audacious. They just set up tables in malls and on street corners and asked people a simple question: which one of these tastes better? And what happened? In these blind taste tests, people consistently chose the sweeter flavor of Pepsi over Coke. It was a marketing masterstroke that planted this nagging seed of doubt in everyone's mind. Hey, maybe the real thing isn't actually the best tasting thing.
The Pepsi Challenge panicked Coca-Cola. It panicked them so much that in 1985, they did the unthinkable. They changed their 100-year-old sacred formula. New Coke, as it was called, was one of the biggest product disasters of all time. The public backlash was insane. And as people rejected the new formula, guess where they went? They flocked to Pepsi. And for a brief, glorious moment, Pepsi actually overtook Coke and became the #1 selling cola in the entire world. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Pepsi's leadership was smart. They knew that winning a few battles in the Cola War wasn't enough to win the whole thing.
To truly compete with a global monster like Coca-Cola, they had to stop playing on Coke's home turf and create a whole new battlefield.
This was the move that changed everything. In 1965, Pepsi merged with Frito-Lay, the absolute king of salty snacks. They understood the perfect synergy. I mean, what goes better with a salty chip than a cold drink? It's a perfect match. This merger created a whole new kind of company, PepsiCo, a diversified giant that was suddenly about way more than just cola.
And from that point on, the empire just exploded. They started acquiring all these other powerhouse brands, like Lay's, Doritos, Gatorade, and Quaker Oats. They built this portfolio with dozens of brands that each, on their own, generate over $1 billion in sales every single year.
But here's the part that might just blow your mind. For the company that started this whole journey as a cola brand, snacks are now the king. Today, PepsiCo makes more money selling Lay's and Doritos than it does from Pepsi, Gatorade, and all of its other drinks combined.
So now, they're this massive global powerhouse, and PepsiCo starts making these incredibly bold, high-stakes moves on the world stage. Some were legendary, genius-level successes, and others were just catastrophic failures.
This has to be one of the wildest stories in all of business history. It's how Pepsi cracked the Soviet Union. The Soviet ruble was worthless outside the country, so you couldn't just sell soda for cash. So they struck a barter deal. Pepsi syrup in exchange for Stolichnaya vodka. But as the deal got bigger, they needed something else to trade. The solution? Warships. No, seriously. For a brief moment in 1989, PepsiCo became the owner of the world's 7th largest navy, before they sold the entire fleet for scrap metal. Just incredible.
But for every crazy win like that, there was a devastating loss. In 1992, they ran a bottle cap promotion in the Philippines that went horribly, horribly wrong. A computer glitch meant that instead of printing 2 winning numbers for the $1 million grand prize, they printed over 500,000 of them. When the company couldn't possibly pay everyone, it led to riots, lawsuits, and even deaths. It's a truly dark chapter in the company's history.
So, after all of this, the bankruptcies, the cola wars, the submarines, where does that leave us today? Well, it leaves us with this fascinating psychological puzzle that really gets to the heart of what the Pepsi brand is.
Decades of research have confirmed this. It's called the Pepsi paradox. In blind taste tests, people genuinely tend to prefer the taste of Pepsi. But the moment you put the labels on the cups, they choose Coke. This goes all the way back to the Cola Wars. It proves that taste alone isn't enough to beat a cultural icon. There's something about Coca-Cola's brand, its history, its power, that literally makes the product taste better inside our brains. And this brings us to the most crucial point. In a way, they both won. They were just playing completely different games. Pepsi realized it could never beat Coke at being Coke, so it built a bigger, more diverse empire around its rival, which now results in higher overall revenue. Meanwhile, Coca-Cola just doubled down on its core strength, and it has maintained the single most valuable beverage brand on the entire planet. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. After a century of all-out war, the bankrupt underdog built an empire that actually makes more money. But the original icon still rules the hearts and minds of consumers worldwide. So, in this epic corporate battle, who's the real winner? And maybe more importantly, how do you even define winning?